The new book is really about two characters. It's called The Illuminations, and The Illuminations is that moment in Blackpool in the north of England when all the lights are turned on at once. 6 miles of neon lighting all comes on in this fantastic sort of arresting moment. And an elderly woman called Anne Quirk and her beloved grandson, Luke, who's been fighting as part of a platoon in Afghanistan, they go there together eventually, and their lives and secrets become known to each other. And in the run-up to that, they're each struggling as kindred spirits. They're struggling with the past, they're struggling and haunted by secrets and lies in their lives. And the book is really, probably of all my books, it's a big story, an attempt to bring these different kinds of experience covering years, a young man and an elderly woman who nevertheless find a common humanity and a sort of common project in trying to get the truth to return to the centre of their lives. "You're in England now," the nurse said. "You're not in Afghanistan anymore, do you hear me?" That was the first time he saw the room, though Scullion knew it wasn't seeing in the normal sense, because everything was blurred with a milky radiance. And then, one at a time, he counted the colours back into his life. She was moving tubes about his face. For minutes or days, he saw her green tunic. She was chatty, the nurse, and her head came in and out of focus, lifting, prodding, reminding him of school. One day, a pair of blue surgical gloves fluttered over him like a hawk. A yellow drink came with a straw, but he couldn't.
There's a lot about photography in the book. The epigraph is, "Photography takes an instant out of time, altering life by holding it still." Is photography an important art form for you?
I think I've really grown up through what I would describe as the sort of the nadir of the idea of photography. That everybody now is a photojournalist. Everybody, not just the selfie takers, but everybody has a device in their pocket that can not only take a picture of a developing event or news story, but they can then transmit it to the world in a matter of seconds. Now, for people who lived before handheld devices, that's still a complete revelation. I can remember writing pieces and trying to get photographic material together for stories in the early 90s where it was quite difficult, and processing was involved in, bike couriers, and, it was a difficult relationship you had with the image and its reception. But now there's just no distance at all. And I think it's changed our understanding of what experience is. I'd go as far as to say that for a generation younger than me, experience doesn't really exist until it's been photographed. And equally, people don't really exist properly until they've been on TV. That's the kind of extension, I think, that if even only imaginatively, it exists somewhere in the common subconscious now. Photography has changed our lives, and I think it probably was always going to. At every stage of photography's development, it has made a difference to our moral self, I think. But now, I wonder if people trust the unphotographed. 3 weeks in critical care. "You're doing great," she said. "You're in Birmingham." Scullion wanted to say this was a contradiction in terms, but he couldn't speak, and he didn't know if his mouth was moving. "Try to be nice." Sunlight broke through the blinds one day. Then he heard Madeleine, her voice by the bed and her hand smoothing his hair. He couldn't afford to be miles away now that Madeleine was here, the spouse of doom, passing small pink sponges into his mouth. "Drink, darling," she said. It's never according to an architect's plan or anything like that, but you realise as you get further down in your career, producing more books, that there's something that they have in common. There are a number of things they have in common. And when I look at all my fictions, I see that they're all, to some extent, dual narratives. I've always liked the idea of a relationship between one, if you like, spot of time and another. In some of my earlier books, it's about going into the past and then back to the present. Sometimes it's about going from one location, as in Personality, the small Scottish island of Bute, to London. In this book, there are two distinct narratives and two distinct individuals, you know, the young soldier fighting in Afghanistan and his beloved grandmother who's living in the west coast of Scotland in an assisted housing complex. I always knew they were coming together, and indeed they suggested and echoed each other in all sorts of ways that mattered to me while I was writing the book. But the dual nature of it seemed compelling to me at the point where I was writing it. I loved the idea that there was a kinship between these two, although they were each haunted in different ways by the events surrounding them. In her case, the past is haunting her because it's re-emerging through her illness, through her dementia. And for him, recent events in this dirty war have begun to encroach in his sense of who he is and the times he's living through. So those two narratives had to exist independently because in life they do. You know, people aren't all just bundled into one place, having a story. Stories, you know, start in different places and end in different places. So I wanted that narrative to be very much structured by those two points of view. He smelt her perfume. Année, année. It came in small bottles. He fell asleep. And when he woke up again, he imagined he saw a goat's bones on the sand and staring down from the mountain, a boy with brown eyes. What if evil came and held your hand and said you were in England?